Hi everyone, this is Richard. In this video, let's talk about two-way binding. So we talked about one-way binding before, right? So we had some property or field down in the code, and the variable had some type of value, and up above in the HTML, we would send the value of the variable up into HTML instead of the variable name itself. So this would be name, and then it was sent up inside here in kind of like a string interpolation thing, okay? So that was one-way binding. Two-way binding is just the opposite as well. So getting HTML information and sending it down to the C# code area. All right. So this is a little bit more complicated to make a point, but I just want to make a point, I guess. What we use for the directive is the @bind value right here. So this is just a regular input, okay? And it's going to be @bind value. Ignore everything else below it for right now. Equals name. Okay, so the value of the input is going to be name. Okay, so it's going to originally, the default is going to be blank, right? And then what we're going to have to do is bind value, the same thing here, and we're going to have to attach an event to it. So an event basically is whenever you interact with the element, that creates an event. So in other words, it sends information down to the code section. All right. This particular event is going to be on input. There's a bunch of different input events you can do on mouse over, on click, but this one will just do on input. And what on input does is every keystroke you put inside of the text space, the text input, it will send a message down into the code. So what should happen is you'll have a input. As you type information, it gets sent down and changes the value of string. And then that in turn will send the information back to your name is. Okay, so if we see right here, as I type it, you notice it is changing it as well. So information here gets sent down to here, it gets sent back up, and it's displaying it here. So that's two-way binding. All right, so I put a few other things. There are some shortcuts that we can do. Okay, so I put input @bind equals name. That's the bottom one right here. We could actually do that as well. What's the difference? Well, the difference is in the input, you only have a value. There's not really much else that you could do. So you could bind a couple of different things, but in this case, value is the only thing that makes sense. So you can just put bind value, bind name. And this, if you do that, the bind value is going to be the same thing, but the default is going to be on change. Okay. Not on input, on change. What's the difference? So here, like we say, hi, right? So it does it right there. If I put, notice no change happens unless I either click off of it or unless I hit the enter. All right, so that's the difference between on change and on input. You have to finish what you're doing in the text box. On input is it changes as you type. All right, can you change that? Yes, you can. So you can always say, @bind. So no bind value, just @bind. So it would be the same thing. And I'm going to say on input also. So let's try that. So I will put, that did not work. Hang on a second. Bind on input. Oh, whoops. You do have to have an event. Okay, so, Now it works on input as well. Okay, but the default, if you leave it out, is going to be on changed. Okay. Now, I'm going to do one other thing here. The equivalent, do you have to do binding? You could also, this is just basically a built-in function here, right? You get some information, it automatically gets set and changes this. But if you want to do this manually, you want to do it yourself for some strange reason, okay? Instead of binding, you can actually just have code for it to manually do the work. In other words, okay, so we're going to have a button right here, press me, and on click, change it. Okay, so there is no binding going on, notice. All we're doing is, if I click on this, I'm going to send an event over, change it to right here. And what it's going to do is put the name and add the name plus hi to it. Okay, and the more I click it, the more highs it's going to have onto it. And then one-way binding, it's going to send that information back up to here, and it says your name is. But wait a minute, because the value of here, name, is also bound here, in the text boxes, it will add that as well. So let's see how this works. So I'm going to say name is Richard, and I'm going to put press me, comma, hi. I'm going to press it again. See, notice it's adding here and here because the value is bound to the name variable here. Okay? So I think that's it with two-way binding. We're going to learn a little bit more about everything as time goes by. Thanks.